MINISFORUM just came out with this here. It's a revision of a previous board that they had. This one here is the BD790i SE. It's an ITX motherboard, an all-in-one, meaning that it has the motherboard, as per usual, but it also has a chip underneath there. In this case, it has an AMD mobile chip, 7940HX. Incredibly capable CPU. That CPU should be able to rival some of the best desktop processors in multi-core workloads, professional tasks, but also gaming. I've used it many times on many different laptops. It's a very capable CPU. This is a revision of an older board that they had a few months ago, and it was the 7945HX. We can see here that what I have is sold out. Too bad you can't buy it. It'll probably be back. This is the previous model. You can see here 7945HX. This is the model that I'm doing in this video, 7940HX. In all honesty, they are basically the same. Now, I did manage to find this on the Canadian Amazon website. You can see there's both of them here. So this is the second edition. It's the first edition. When you translate them over to Canadian, it's pretty similar to MINISFORUM, I suppose. This is the MINISFORUM store. This is some random, so I'm not sure if I buy off that. But primary difference here, I'll just show you real quick. 7945HX. 7940HX. It's basically the same CPU. It is actually the same CPU. They're just spec'd out slightly differently. Clocks in that 5.4 gigahertz versus 5.2 gigahertz. Basically the same thing, honestly. Other differences, there's a few other little tweaks here. This one here has a PCI, has a fan over the M.2 slots. It's kind of cool. That's also way more expensive. The second edition here, it does not have that. So there's a few differences, but that's what I'm reviewing here today. So you can see the NVMe are open. It's fine. I put on my own little heat sinks. Very cool. You do get a full PCI slot here. PCI 5, X16, so fast, very fast. And then here, under here, is a big metal radiator, and you can mount a 120 millimeter fan on there, just a standard case fan. And what's underneath there, you can see. You mount a 120 millimeter fan on this giant radiator. 7940HX processor is a 16-core 32-thread processor. It is the 7950X desktop processor, which is basically wattage limited. So on this platform here, it runs at 100 watts, around 100 watts, whereas the desktop processor 7950X is unlocked. You have the CPU right on the motherboard. You just slap a 120 millimeter fan on there, some storage, and some laptop RAM, and you're good to go. I find to be probably the most interesting thing here is, let's go with Canadian dollars. This is the 7950X. It's 664 Canadian dollars. That's a good price. This thing's not on sale very often. That's a very good price there. Okay. This is cheaper. It's the same CPU. It's the same CPU. 7950X basically slapped into 105 watt eco mode. Watch the Gamers Nexus video where they talk about it. There's almost no performance drop whatsoever. You're actually paying less money, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. If you're going to be buying this product here and you're going to be going for a small form factor build, then I would just buy this because that's what I did. This is my primary desktop. I have the same CPU, just tweaked ever so slightly. I guess I had to get some laptop RAM. I already had it, and I don't have access to SATA ports. This is going to be the case that I'm going to use. It's a Cooler Master NR200P. There are small form factor cases out there, for sure. You can absolutely get smaller ones. So I didn't want to go with something that was super tiny. It can be a bit of a pain. I don't need a super small form factor, something that's like, you know, that big there. You could put it in a normal ITX board, but that's going to be perfect because it's an all-in-one. I don't need to worry about a CPU fan, but technically I could. Like if I had a normal ITX, you could put in a big fan here. This thing here is pretty slim, and I'm just going to be able to slap a nice fan on top there. So there's an Intel model of this you can get with 12900HX, I think it is, which has some advantages in that motherboard has actually 2 SATA ports on it. You'll notice when we pull this out, this doesn't have any SATA ports on it at all. So you only get the storage here, 2 NVMe, right? So you're going to get 2 total drives in this, no extra storage. The Intel one does have SATA, 2 SATA ports, so you get some more storage. The disadvantages of the Intel one are it's a inferior CPU in like realistically all ways. It also uses DDR4 memory, if I'm not wrong, so you're gonna get slightly slower memory, but that's not a big deal, realistically. Slower CPU, and then the PCI lane on here is faster, 5 by 16, and I think the Intel has 4 by 8 or something, so it's a little bit slower. But nice big radiator on that. right? This CPU can get hot. It's not super hot. I mean, it's meant for laptops, right? It's a lower wattage, but it is capable of getting hot. This is a huge radiator, so realistically, it's just not going to get hot on this here, especially when we put a fan on top of it, a nice big fan. This thing should not run hot whatsoever. Nice PCI slot there with metal to enhance it, so you're less likely to get some bending. 2 RAM slots. Of course, this is SOTA memory, so it uses laptop memory, DDR5 laptop memory. 2 NVMEs, like I said, some general chipsets, case CPU fan, so you're going to slap on just like any fan. Very nice. Not a review unit. I bought it, so I could complain, but I'm not. That's fine. 2 USB-A. Looks like they're Gen 3 of some kind, so relatively fast. DisplayPort and HDMI. This does have integrated graphics. The integrated graphics suck on it, but it's enough for 4K desktop use. You're just not going to be gaming on it. I think it's either the 710M or the 610M. It's not fast. I believe it's the 710M on these here. Not meant for gaming, but you could still use it for desktop use if you don't want to put in a PCI, so it'll be totally fine. If you're just doing only CPU tasks, this thing is a behemoth. Then you also get 1 USB-C on the device here, so you can run a dock, for example. It's not USB 4, unfortunately. That's one thing that does suck, but you can still hook up, docks and that too. Put in some like peripherals there, HDMI, whatever. So it's meant to be fairly streamlined, right? Like it's going to be almost like something like a laptop. A full ATX board give you a little bit more, maybe some SATA on that, but that's going to be nice and simplistic. I'm going to be mounting my GPU horizontal like this while you can mount it vertically inside this case. That's because the CPU here has a fan that's going to be pulling directly from the side rather than from the front of the case. I don't want to block that. With the GPU, if it's sitting up a little bit higher, I could potentially block off that airflow, so that's going to be a problem there. So if you put it on a horizontal setup, it's going to be pulling air in from the bottom instead. This is a slightly more powerful card. It's a 7900 GRE. Which 16 gigabytes VRAM. I mean, it's around a 4070 Super. I'd say it's a bit more powerful, but similar. You're going to have to take off the front here. Now, this is a big card, big 3-fan card. The reason I'm putting this in partially is to just see how much wiggle room we have for bigger cards. Biggest issue here is going to be the power supply here. If you get the true small one, this is the small form factor large, I guess you'd call it. But if you get the just small form factor, I believe cables are going to be up slightly taller because you're not going to have that extra inch of PSU down there. So that's going to be the only issue here, is actually that being in the way. But let's see here. Yeah, so it's definitely not going to be too long. It's going to be right at the front. Once it's in, let's just go like that there. Yeah, so it actually does fit right in there. Once the front's on, it'll be fine. The biggest issue is going to be this power supply. If you had the small form factor, not large, it would be not an issue. But you can see here, those cables stick down quite a bit. Just for testing purposes, yeah, I may actually do that. It's just a little camera thing. Just because I don't want weight on the PCI bracket. Right, so they're not bulging out. That there. This fan here is just basically going to blow air directly into the CPU. That's it's nice and pretty, but it's a full ATX case, and it's in fact a large ATX case. Lots of room to fit all this stuff. When you're getting into the small form factor stuff, sometimes you're just like happy that it even fits in. So yeah, look at that. Nice little GRE system there. Okay, get the side on here. Lots of room. Okay, so here it is, mostly assembled. Took that out so you can actually see what's going on inside. It's a wire mess. We'll deal with that later. I don't really care about wire mess in a small form factor case as long as it works. I have the GRE right up to the front here, 7900 GRE. A little bit of room there, no problem. You have to take off the front there and you actually put it in. It fits through that little hole there, and then you put it back in and you lock it in, so that's nice. It's looking really good, honestly, really nice. This is the larger size, small form factor. The only negative is the wires are a little tight because it sits down, whereas a normal small form factor would be there. This one's a little bit bigger, so you do have to kind of get them in there and kind of get them out of the way rather than, otherwise you'll have too much pressure on your GPU. If you have a long one, or if you had some small GPU, it wouldn't matter. It's a long boy, so that's important. Okay, here's a second build that I did. It's a time jump. I decided to also test it out in a different system. I just used that one for, it's been like a month and a half. I decided to build an NVIDIA option for people who are interested in NVIDIA. It's basically the exact same machine, other than the NVIDIA. You can see it's a slightly larger case here. Still a somewhat of a small form factor, but not truly. This is an ATX type case, so ITX has tons of room in here, even on the bottom. And in this case, I'm able to fit fans on the bottom, directly feeding into the GPU. So just to show some diversity of what you can do here. On that other really small case, I mean, this GPU actually did fit in the other case. This is a 4070 Ti. It's basically the same form factor as the 7900 XTX. It's also MSI, so they're very similar. It fit in both cases, but then I decided, why not? I'm going to build a larger system here. The advantage of this one here is you don't have to pay into as much small form factor tacker. It's an Asus Prime case. Very nice. Full size power supply here. You don't need to get a small form factor. This is just a standard ATX power supply here, A1000G. There's a little bit more room here for fans on the top, obviously, so I can have exhaust or intake, whichever way you want to do it. In this case, I'm feeding up, so I have two 140s on the bottom there. They're actually not the same brand, but they run quiet, feeding directly into the GPU, and there's enough to come out to basically come into the rest of the system. Exhaust up. I've been playing with this for like a day now, trying different fan orientations, coming in, all the different options there. I just find that this one runs the coolest so far. So this is another system option you can do with these little boards here. You can go with that really small form factor that I had before. You could technically go smaller than that if needed, or you could go with something like this that's still relatively slim, but you get more room, for example, this way, and you can use more standardized parts. You don't have to use small form factor parts. The difference of this case here, and this is the reason that I wanted to build this one here doesn't have a direct fan going into the CPU there. On the other Cooler Master case, there was a fan here, right, as you remember, fed directly, sat right there, fed air from the outside directly into the fan on the CPU. This one here doesn't have that benefit. So the CPU actually does run hotter in the setup here. The reason being is this fan here is just basically pulling passively moving air. This one here is just basically pulling air that's moving around. So however I get air into this case, somehow, it's just going to pull it in and exhaust it out. It's not being fed direct air, right? Whereas in some cases, depending on how you set them up, you might have air going through. This case is kind of more designed for an AIO, because you're going to put your liquid cooling pump there, put your AIO up there, some fans into the GPU, and then the system just exhausts, and it doesn't matter, right? It's going to be pulling air much more readily throughout the system. This one here is just hoping to get some CPU cooling air from here and here. So, I mean, I might actually be better off picking up a smaller, unfortunately this sits over top of it. That's the other thing I wanted to show there. If I could put another 120 millimeter fan there, I could basically just have it pulling air right into that, kind of in a loop, a feedback loop, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in there, so I'd have to put in like a smaller fan, like a little 100 millimeter fan. On the other system, the CPU ran quite cool, honestly, quite cool. And in this one here, it runs quite a bit warmer. I'd say almost 10 degrees. I'll put up the numbers and we can see the difference here, but it does run almost 10 degrees warmer on this one because it's not getting directly fed. However, the GPU runs significantly cooler. So I guess it depends how you prioritize. This case is much better for GPU cooling with this setup here, but it does kind of, it's a little bit lackluster with the CPU. I did some tests on the XTX system. I think I lost all my footage, to be totally honest. I ended up switching SSDs, and I think data got corrupted because I tried to open up a few videos and they didn't work. So all my game testing footage for the XTX is gone, unfortunately. But let's fire up this here with the 4070 Ti, which is not as nearly as powerful as the GPU, but we can get an example of some performance here and basically some noise. Okay, and here's the noise of the system. Again, this is actually more fans than the previous setup, so it's actually more noisy. I haven't got it set up fully yet. I'm just downloading some games, so the CPU is being used, and this is how silent it is. It is absurdly quiet when just running, like there's no noise here. Okay, so let's come back with some Cinebench temperatures for the CPU, just really load that up, and then we'll come back with quick game footage and then temperatures on the gaming and noise on the gaming as well. Running some Cinebench here, we'll just get some noise and temperatures as well. So we're just going to start the test here, have a quick look at the noise level. It doesn't really go up, this is pretty much just static how it is. You can see how quiet it is, 33, 34. Right, very, very, very quiet on this CPU here under full load. Scores are incredibly good, 31, 32,000. That's very good, especially for AMD. It's not as much of a Cinebench beast, but I mean, this is basically a 7950X in a desktop that's put into a laptop, and the temperatures here are very good under Cinebench. It's running at about 100 watts here, which is basically 105 watt eco mode on the 7950X. Very good. And again, this is the inferior fan setup. The other fan setup was even cooler by maybe 5 to 10 degrees, but you can see here it's still running very cool. And still under load, staying the same. Okay, and now we're just going to do a little Black Myth Wukong, not really for performance. I mean, you kind of know what a 4070 can do, and a 7950X, which is, this basically is a 7950X in eco mode, and we're at 4K ultra wide here, so it's going to perform very well. It runs very quiet overall, around 35-36 dB, not much noisier than just kind of an idle. It's a very quiet system. Just kind of play through here just so you can see how amazing this tiny little system can do. Again, you could have this in the previous system, the bigger one like this, whatever it is. It's kind of crazy what you can get into for around 500 Canadian dollars. That's more than the cost of a 7950X on its own, let alone a motherboard, let alone this full tiny little setup here. And it's super versatile for what you can do. You can see here the settings. Do a little bit of DLSS here, a little bit of frame gen in that, but again, we're at 4K ultra wide. Temperatures here are a little warm on the CPU. Obviously it kicks out when you go into hardware info for some reason, but it runs a little warm. But again, it's a 7950X, essentially desktop CPU. That's a mobile version, but it's the same CPU in a tiny little system like this with no direct fan, just a single fan sitting on it. GPU runs super cool. I mean, very respectable temperatures here and outstanding performance. So, I mean, moral of the story is here, as this guy kills me, is that these MINISFORUM all-in-one 7940HX systems here are incredibly good value. You get a powerful CPU, awesome CPU, and a great motherboard, and the cost is low for what it is. So let's bring it all together now. You can buy on the MINISFORUM website you can't buy the second edition anymore, it's sold out. It was a really good price. You can still buy the original one there, which does have some advantages like that extra CPU, the extra M.2 cooling. If you care about that, you get that advantage there. I would highly recommend to go with this one here though, and not just for people who are like me. And I recommend this for a variety of different people. If you're a gamer, you're buying into one of the best gaming CPUs on the market. There are better ones, you know, the X3D stuff obviously is better, but this is an outstanding gaming CPU, truly an outstanding gaming CPU, and I mean for the price, it's kind of a no-brainer. Then for people who are doing compute, this is actually like potentially the second or at worst the third best CPU on the market for raw compute for in the consumer space until you get into like, you know, server type stuff. It's this CPU here. Realistically, the only better CPU is the 9950X, right? If you could buy that, I guess, if you wanted, right, pay even more money. You have to buy a motherboard on top of that. You'd have to get an ITX motherboard. You're going to pay twice just for the motherboard and the CPU, honestly. I mean, you could maybe get into 14900, which is going to cost you the same as the whole system again. It's also going to be an Inferno in a small little form factor. This thing here is cheaper than both of them, going to perform roughly the same, if not better. It's going to offer incredible value. You're going to be able to take this thing here, slap it into a mini PC, and really, really get a lot of advantage out of it.